So, the story about a man who starts going to church because he learns that if he tithes, he will have his storehouses overflowing, that he will get what he gives in return and in spades. So, after a few years of attending a church, he requires of the pastor, says, "Pastor, I've been tithing for 3 years. Where's my money?" He honestly expected that as he tithed, he would be getting money back in return. Not to say that that isn't the case in many cases, but what this story shows is his motive. What was his motive for tithing? What are our motives for the things we ask for? Motive is very critical in our relationship with God and in our walk in this life. Motives can take us very far away from our God. Motives can also bring us very close to our God. So let's explore motives for a moment. In Proverbs 10, verse 24, it says that the desire of the righteous will be granted. Okay, does that mean we get whatever we want? In James chapter 1, it says to ask, and you shall receive. And Matthew says the same thing, that whatever you ask of the Father will be granted unto you. It doesn't really seem to be playing out that way in our lives. We ask for many things and don't receive them. So what are we missing out on? Motive. So James says to ask and you'll receive, but a couple verses later it says to ask in faith. So now we're learning more about how we should ask. And then a couple chapters later, or a few chapters later in James also, it says that you lust and you want things but you don't have it. You fight for them and you don't get it. Then he says, and you ask and you don't receive because you ask amiss or ask by wrong motives, that you may consume them upon your lusts. So he's saying you ask for the wrong reasons and you won't get what it is you're asking for, like the guy in the story. He wasn't asking for a return on his tithe so that he can bless the church, so that he can do ministry, so that he could give to the poor. He was tithing because he wanted money in return. Selfish motive. All right, so when we think about our motives, think about the motives behind other things that the Bible promises us, okay? It says that if you delight yourself in the Lord, He will give you the desires of your heart. Should we take that at face value? Well, let's think about Jesus. We know Jesus delighted Himself in the Father, yet He desired that the Father take this cup from Him, the cup being the suffering and the crucifixion that He was about to face. He desired for that cup to be taken from Him. But we also see that He desired even more that the will of His Father be done. So the Father did not grant Him His desire for that cup to be passed from Him, but in harmony with His Son, He went through with what the Father's desire was, which was for Him to be crucified for the sins of mankind. So even in Jesus' case, and just any desire wouldn't necessarily get you the result you wanted. They needed to be according to the will of the Father. And so we have to remember that. I know in these days, there's a lot of people who believe in healing, as well they should. God can do anything, and sometimes He does do things, and He wants us to hope for the improved situation of others, the healing of others physically, things of that nature. That's a good thing to hope for. It's a good thing to pray for. It's a good thing to expect. But we can't expect that to happen outside the will of the Father. So we have situations where sometimes we believe that it's always God's will for people to be healed physically. Well, is that biblical? Well, think about Jesus. He died from His injuries. The Father didn't heal Him of His injuries. He let Him die from them. If it was always the Father's will that we heal from our sicknesses and injuries and things of that nature, well, then no one would die. But that's not how the world is right now. So even when it comes to healing, we have to acknowledge our motives for healing, for wanting healing. We also have to acknowledge what God's will might be in that situation. It is not always His will that we are healed physically from disease, from sickness, from injuries, things of that nature. Not always. So we can pray for people, but we have to rely on the Father, and we have to be praying from the right heart position with the right motives. So remember, our motives are critical in our relationship with God, in our walk with Him, and in our life here on this earth, as we hope to fulfill our purpose and our destiny, our God-given calling on this earth. So have the motive that will bring you closer to God. Now, can you just change your motive? No. There's places in the Bible where there are those, yes, preach it, my four-legged friends. There are those in Scripture who pray that the Lord would change their hearts. All right, the Lord is the one who, when you love Him and give yourself to Him and desire to be a living sacrifice for Him and His kingdom and His purposes, He can change your heart. So we look to the Lord to give us the motives. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.